Alright, so we're halfway into the volume. Obviously I'm not late whatsoever. This is exactly directly in the middle of the volume. Yeah, I'm really late. I meant to be doing this like 2 to 3 weeks ago, but I got really busy with school because my semester's ending, so it'd be like that sometimes. Plus, since I was smart enough to go on a trip to my nation's capital for a weekend, I got no work done. I'm also sick right now, so there's that. But I'm here now, ready to talk about how the volume's doing. So comparing this volume to volume 5, it's like a masterpiece. Comparing it to the other volumes, though, it's still pretty damn good. So far they've gotten in a train wreck, discovered a genie, learned the backstory of Ozpin and Salem, learned about how gods destroyed the world, got the answer how to kill Salem.
You can't.
Oh. They found what was basically a graveyard and a sort of new Grimm, which I can say is the creepiest Grimm in the entire series, and I love it. We finally find another character who has had silver eyes and got to hear more about how to use them. They got to Argus before the end of the volume and spoke to a character, that of which I already forgot the name of because I was too disappointed that it wasn't winter like we were all thinking it would be. RWBY told Junior about the whole Salem can't be killed thing, and finally, Oscar runs away. That's a ton of stuff to happen, and we're only halfway, a little over halfway, through the volume. I like to mention first and foremost how they emphasize Crow's alcoholism and how it's actually a bad thing. In previous volumes, they made it just seem like a character trait that made him look cooler, and it wasn't bad. I'm so happy they're actually making it look like a bad thing because, it is. He's obviously trying to cope with trauma and depression, and it is finally affecting him negatively in the show. So much so he did nothing when they were attacked by the apathy and was fighting to stay and wallow and probably die. RWBY seems to be more of a character than ever before. She's showing more emotion than happy and optimistic and occasionally sad. This girl's dealing with shit and it's showing more. She's getting angry and stressed and scared, and it's great. I like to point out that this,
I'm not leaving without the lamp!
And this,
But I see you've still got that stick right out. Oh, Miss,
and then this,
where are you?
happened in literally the same day, like hours apart. Yang is angry, and rightfully so. She's still dealing with some PTS, and it's affecting her mood and feelings. Her scene with Blake in the workshop was pretty great, and it shows how the two remember that night very differently. Blake remembers it as not being able to protect Yang and vice versa. That being said, Yang also thinks Blake is enabling her, thinking she's weak / not strong enough to protect herself or do anything for herself. A well-written scene expressing the emotions between the two. But why was Yang suddenly seeing a hallucination of Adam again? Why was this only the second time we saw this? Yeah, she dreamed of him once too, but if you want to count that, this has only happened 3 times, and never happened once in Volume 5. So what? Why wasn't she feeling any of this during Volume 5 to this degree? Her hand shook like 3 times, and I don't remember her even mentioning Adam. Besides that, it's a good scene. I honestly can't think of much to say about Weiss and Blake since they're both kind of more in-depth going into the volume. I know people are gonna say Blake wasn't, but she wasn't a 2D character. She has emotions and trauma and mood swings like everybody else. She feels like she needs to make everything up to Yang somehow, but doesn't exactly know how, and she's incredibly awkward about it. If we're gonna talk about Weiss, I like how they added little tidbits here and there. When somebody yells, she flinches in the background. When Jean was going after Oscar, she defended him in a panicked voice. I saw people say how she should have done more and she was shitty for letting Jean attack Oscar, but Weiss grew up in an abusive household where going against the authority figure resulted in punishment. She grew up with an aggressive father who would abuse her, whether verbally or physically, whenever she stepped out of line. She was doing what she was used to doing, and that was not involve herself any further because she was afraid of the consequences. Chapter 6 was my favorite episode. They introduced the apathy, there were some good emotions going through it, and tones of voice, etc. For example, the Crow scene I mentioned earlier about him drinking and not noticing the apathy. RWBY was so mad at one point she was literally shaking. She yelled at people for once. Weiss got to do this.
Hey, what are you doing?
She probably wanted to do this for years, since her mother is an alcoholic who doesn't care for her anymore due to the wine. This parallels to RWBY breaking the bottle of alcohol that Crow dropped because she cares for him and doesn't want him to sink deeper into his depression. She wants him to talk to her about his problems so he has a healthier outlet than drinking. They finally talked about the Silver Eyes in the last 2 episodes, chapters 7 and 8. We got a sick flashback of Maria's past. I'm convinced talk is a protest against TikTok.
Bitch, what the fuck?
It's also so much fun to rewatch the fight scene once you learn Maria's semblance. Her weapon is bloody awesome and you think she couldn't be stopped until... Well, her last move is pretty smart. In Chapter 8, she tells RWBY exactly how to use her eyes, and we learn that silver-eyed warriors were created, in a way, by the god of light to counter the god of darkness's Grimm, and the power of the eyes can only be used on Grimm. That being said, with Oscar missing and Maria telling RWBY that they could only train her by actually fighting Grimm, and that the RWBY volume finales always have a fight scene in the end, everybody is probably gonna go find Oscar outside the city with some Grimm, and they're gonna fight the Grimm. Maria will probably be like, "Hey girl, use your eyes. Think of love and your friends and protecting humanity and shit." And RWBY will be like, "Shit, aight, B," and glow it up. That was an annoying way to explain it, but that's my theory about how the volume will wrap up. Speaking of wrapping up, this will be the end of the video. I am very stuffy, and my throat still hurts. Tell me how good or bad this was and what you thought of the volume so far, and how you think the volume finale will go. Thanks for watching.